So for me, it was a little frustrating. I think for the Sanders family, for him to
Mhm.
finally get his name called was a
Yeah,
relief.
it
It
was.
it is for every, like, thank God, he was supposed to go, like, at least somebody drafted him, and not in a bad way, but when if you buy into the hype,
Mhm.
oh, he should be a number one pick, he should be first round, he should be this, oh, he should be, and then it doesn't happen. When it finally happens, it's a relief, you
Mhm.
know. So, I'm not going to get in the whole conversation about humbling him and things like that, or humbling his dad, or, what his dad may or may not do. I
Mhm.
mean, at the end of the day, the reality is, if you go and you look at a rookie contract, there's nothing to negotiate. It's,
Yeah. Mhm.
you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
somebody was just telling me that the other day. Mhm.
Right. There's nothing to negotiate. It is, unless they are a first round pick, everything, well, everything is slotted, meaning that everybody, based on where you get drafted, they already say, here's what your signing bonus is, here's what your annual salary is. Um, First round is the only one that gets guaranteed, and the money just goes down from there. So
Mhm.
there's nothing really. So, he may not have had an agent. His dad may have, quote unquote, been his agent, and that's fine too, but,
Mhm.
like, just like some of this, like, people just talk sometimes to talk. People have, their podcasts, and they get on, or their shows, and they get on and they rant and they rave and they do, and, this sounds good, that sounds good, so I'm gonna say it,
Right.
you know. And they don't have a clue what they've talked about. They have never been in a facility. They have never talked with a football coach outside of their own
Right.
high school coach. And
Right.
it's like, dude, y'all don't
It,
even you don't even know the half of what's
they
going
don't
on.
they don't know. And that to me, is it's annoying,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just so much talk in public. We all talk, amongst each other, but it's just so much like talk, talk, talk all day long. And for me, you still got to remember that this is a young man, and there's a lot of pressure that comes up. I don't care how
Mm-hmm.
confident you are.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of pressure that comes from just constantly being compared, judged, talked about, and people are going to want to tear you apart. Just like, when they build you up and it's all beautiful, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to come for you. And when they come for you, it's all part of it,
Right.
and I think a lot of it had more to do with his dad than it did with him. And I just think that everybody has a part that they play in it. And like you were saying, there were kids that could have and should have, but they didn't go. Their name wasn't Shador Sanders, but there were kids that didn't get called, and they could have and they should have gone. Um,
Right.
and then I don't like to take anything away from other people like a Cam Ward, because that boy, is quite deserving. He was a
Mm-hmm.
Heisman candidate. Wasn't nobody talking, like you said, you couldn't even talk about him because they were so busy talking about
Right.
this whole situation. And then, but this kid still deserved that recognition and that time to shine, but he still kept going, and he's confident, and
Mm-hmm.
he speaks up, when he's spoken to. And, I remember seeing video of him and Shador out throwing, and they're friends. And he spoke his mind. He actually, I was surprised. I thought he was a little more quiet than that. He was talking some stuff amongst each other, and they were
Mm-hmm.
joking and
Mm-hmm.
everything. But he's confident, he's educated, and his daddy is involved and confident and educated, and his mama, and nobody was hating on them. So I think it sometimes it does boil down to personality, or whatever it is. Like you said, whatever we don't know about that transpired in phone calls behind the scenes or whatever. But Vanita, I know you got something to say about this. I need you. I want you
Well,
to,
I'll say this.
expound.
Yeah, this was the first time that I actually watched the draft from the beginning to the end. My
Uh-huh.
first real experience watching it, and what I thought it would be, and what it was. I don't even know if I would watch it again, to be honest with you, because something to me that I was so excited about and excited for the young men that were being drafted and the families. I love the family stories. I love to see the excitement. I love all of that stuff. The way that they presented it to me, and like I said, my first time really watching it, it took all the fun out of it because it was so much about, to me, tearing down Shador and Deion Sanders. It was all about tearing them down to me. It was like, it, what about all the other part that was so good about the draft and the talent that was there, the things that people accomplished, and all that fun stuff, and the teams that we're going to go to, and what kind of team we we're going to, we could expect to see, and the expectations of the season starts, all this fun, good stuff you're all excited about and
Mhm.
wanting to see. That was like, my goodness, it was almost like the thrill of it, like watching, like, oh, but he didn't go again. All it was just like so much to me. It was so negative,
Mhm.
and I was
Mhm.
so excited. I have them on my bus jersey today. I had on my bus jersey then, and I
Mhm.
was just excited just for the whole experience of it all. Just the way that they went about it. I don't think that they should. To me, I think it was more about getting at his father as opposed to looking at the talent and letting his talent speak for itself. It was more or less about what you may or may not like about Deion Sanders as opposed to what his son had exhibited. And he earned the right to be there. To me, he earned the right to have the position that he was given as far as supposedly going into the first round because the film speaks for itself, the number speaks for itself, his performance speaks for itself. When he goes out there and he throws that ball, his daddy's name is not what makes those balls be accurate and point on, and the hard work they had to put in, because him and his brother both, Shiloh and him both, to me, in my opinion, could sit back as rich, entitled kids and not do anything as far as pursuing football. Football is a very hard sport. I mean,
Mhm.
it's not for the weak at heart. It's very hard, and it people. I don't think people realize the time that they have to put into that, the things that these young men sacrifice, the things that they miss out on. That say a friend may be able to go to or whatever, because they got to be up early, they got to be out on the field, they got to work so many hours, and it's not just one
Mhm.
coach that you have. You got your speed coach, as for my son, you got your running back coach, you got your one that's going to do the footwork with you. You got your regular workout. You got all these things that you got to do. They're taking care of their bodies. Certain massages you got to get done. Certain treatments you got to get done. Then your back. It's so much that they're doing
Mhm.
that. I don't think people realize the things that these young athletes really sacrifice to get to the level that they're at. And just to know that those, to me, not that they're the only two men that did it, but in the position that they're put in, they could easily sit back and just live on their dad's money. But for them to go out and work that hard and get the skill and do everything everybody else has to do, it seems like nobody even takes that in consideration. I don't think they're just sitting there being just entitled Deion Sanders kids, that his Deion's name is not what made that football get into Travis Hunter's hand. Like, your son is a quarterback, so you don't got a good quarterback. I don't care how many receivers you got out there. If you ain't got a quarterback that can get you the ball, it doesn't mean anything. So it's a very important position,
Mhm.
and that's why I agree with
But I
what.
will add the reverse is true too. You could have the best quarterback in the
I
world, but
know
the
that's
receiver
right.
don't catch that
I
ball.
know
Yeah,
that's right from the receiver mama, because it's going to be a lot of incompletions. Thank you very much.
Right, right.
it's
Or
true.
interceptions because they done tipped the ball in the air and now it's. So yeah, I mean, no, I think you're right.
You can have a good looking car and not have an engine, and it ain't gonna go. So and that's why they call it a team, right? And it is a team effort.
Right,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
right.
I think the way that they went about the draft is just, I think they missed the whole point. The whole point of it all, as far as what we should have been able to celebrate, the things we should have been able to be happy about, that I think it
Uh-huh.
caused so much division. I think it shows so many ugly parts of it, because I mean, it is a business.
Mhm.
I think a
Yeah,
lot of things that were exposed, that it just
yeah.
changes the taste in your mouth. Like, I don't know if you guys saw where the son of the Falcons coach did a prank call to
Mhm.
him. Now,
Mhm.
Mhm.
had it been reversed, and I'll say right now, so nobody has to guess, I am a Deion Sanders fan, a
Mhm.
primetime fan, a Colorado Buffalo fan. So I'll just go ahead and put that out there now, so nobody
Mhm.
got to guess. But had it been, on the other hand, if Deion Sanders, one of his sons, had gotten into his iPad or whatever he claimed he got into, and got a number and called it a prank call to somebody that's being in the draft, whatever, we would never hear the end of it. It would be, he would have hell to pay for it. Heads would
Mhm.
roll, people would be
Mhm.
fired. And I mean, just for them to go that far and do that kind of thing, I mean, okay, yeah, their dad is a celebrity. They're still human beings. They're still flesh and blood. They still have feelings. Like, why would he do something like that and pranking and videotape? Like, To me, that's just so out of order. And that coach, that was so irresponsible. I mean, if you're any kind of person, any type of position, you don't just leave valuable documents around. That's just like working in the Social Security office and you got everybody's Social Security number out on your personal pad at home. You just lay it out on the table. That was, to me, that's just so ridiculous and just so careless and just everything just seems to be so one-sided. I just wish that it could have been the way I dreamed it to be in my head. Like, oh my God, we're yelling, we're screaming, we're cheering, everybody's happy,
I
everybody's
know,
having a
because
good time.
that's what it was supposed to be.
Right.
It was like a soap opera of the worst kind.
Right.
But you know what I feel, Vanita, everything that you said, totally, I'm with it. I validate it, not that I need to validate it, but I do feel like it was already a circus before we got to the draft day, right? It was just always constantly that talking about, like Melva said, it was a Shador Sanders show when there were other kids who were also in the running, other kids who were out there working every day, whose families were supporting them and all of that. So that was already the setup. And then I wonder if it was the draft. It didn't seem to me like it was the draft people, right? Whoever they are, that created this monster. Like Melva said, it's the media. It's all of the things that have been said prior because people have very strong opinions from the combine, whether or not Shador should have participated in the combine. If he wasn't going to participate, him being there, some of the things that he said, some of the ways that he answered questions, people had problems with that. People had problems, with when Dion was on like the Tamra Hall show, and he said, I'm going to be involved. I'm going to tell my son, no, you're going to go this way. No, we're going to go that way because that's my son. And I'm going to always steer him. People have problems with that. It's the people, I feel like, not necessarily the draft situation, because in the draft every year we see that there are kids that should go, but they don't go, or they go
Right.
in the later rounds when they should have gone in the beginning. And then when people say it's an attack on the Black man, I feel like we have that card, and that card is valid and relevant sometimes, but Cam Ward went. So it wasn't that we don't want a Black man to be a number one pick or in the first round, because there were several, a lot. It's just one of those things where I think it boils down to sometimes it boils down to an individual thing. And, we all have to own that. What part do we play in that? And if we're not, we don't cause all of this stuff, because some of this stuff is just downright ugly, terrible. Some of it is racist. Some of it is just stupid, ridiculous. But then we all do play a part. Like Melva was saying, nobody's accusing anybody of anything, but if I am your agent, then I'm handling certain things, and there are certain things that may go down. It's going to be my responsibility, or I have to be accountable for, because I have to handle them a certain way. I have to ask questions a certain way, or I have to present things in a certain way. So I think when we take on that heavy role like Dion has for his son, and just being a mouthpiece, for him, being his coach, and throughout his entire college career and all of those things, he is going to bear the brunt of all of those people, and everything that they have to say, negative as well as positive. You know what I mean?
And I don't think it's a Black thing, because if you take out all the Black players out of the NFL, there'll be no NFL. So I
Right.
doubt they have
Right.
a problem with that. But they do have a problem with Deion Sanders. And I don't think that his son should have to suffer the things he had to suffer because he's Deion Sanders' son. Now, when
Right.
Peyton's dad talked his stuff and said what he wouldn't have him do to his son, nobody cared. Nobody cared about that. He was allowed, as a white father, to say that. But all the
Mm-hmm.
time, in my opinion, as Black people, we always
Mm-hmm.
have to keep our mouth shut, keep our head down, and stay in our place, stay in our lane. But other people, they can be protected, but we're always supposed to be unprotected, and we can't be Black fathers, or we can't be Black mothers. We can't love our kids or protect our kids the way other nationalities are able to do without being judged by it.
Process, because Dorian had agents who understood the draft process, not from, oh, I've been drafted before, but from, we have managed other quarterbacks through the draft process. And so now we understand, look, the preparation going into interviews, those interviews just aren't, I think to a point they've done away with the wild questions they used to have back in the day.
That's what I heard. It's not as
bad. But there's still, it's not just about, oh, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite color? Part of it is, hey, get up on the whiteboard, and draw out your favorite play. Okay, now, what happens if the defense changes and it goes from a cover 0 to a cover 2? Now what? What are you expecting? Like, you've got to be able to do all of that. That doesn't just happen from playing football. And some quarterbacks are in situations where they don't get that preparation. Okay. And some of that, like Dorian and them said, that is one thing Chip Kelly stressed to them. And then they did always, all the UCLA players, like, that's why people are always amazed. Like, well, why did UCLA players get drafted and, UCLA sucked? Like, they don't even win.
Right.
And it's because they're prepared for that interview. And then when you are going through your draft preparation, you should be doubly preparing for it.
Right.
I can tell you, when Dorian went through his agents called me asking me questions about Dorian's personal life because they were concerned that things may come up during the interview. So, I can't say what happened in Shador's interviews, but what I can say is you have to be prepared. All of us have interviewed for jobs, and we all have to be prepared, and we have to be able to go in and produce. Like in my field, I have to be able to go in and do what we call a job talk and talk about my research and what it is that I've been doing, and I have to be able to do that well. And there's people who are going to listen to me and look at it and go, no. And then there's people who are going to be like, oh yeah, that was great. So, I want, the process is so much more than what most people know. I think it's my takeaway message. And there's so much that can go on there's so much that goes on in that process.
And I believe that.
So, it's easy to take sound bites and say, this is what happened, without fully understanding. I think, to a point, the family made some decisions. I don't necessarily agree with them. And that may have come back to bite them in the butt, but you have to live with it. At the end of the day, though, there's only 32 players who are going to go in that first round.
Right.
And I don't remember how many quarterbacks went. I should know this because I know my cousin's going to call me.
There were 5 before him.
So 5 before him. Okay. So not even a whole bunch went in the first round. So, you have to, you have to remember that piece. Like, we're not talking like 20 people got, drafted. 20 quarterbacks got drafted ahead of him.
And 2 of them were Heisman candidates, so they weren't trash quarterbacks, right? So, yeah.
So you have to say, okay, I think it would be a completely different conversation if he hadn't gotten drafted. Like, that conversation would be insane. He got drafted. He's going to a team, which is way better than all the ones who are undrafted free agents. And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to minimize the
A
chatter,
free agent, yeah.
you know, or but he is, and he's slotted for a contract that is way more than an undrafted free agent. And I think, like, people just need to, yes, the media hyped us up that he was going, and it was very, and, like, a lot of us have watched Shador and Shiloh since they were middle school, high school, but, they're young men, they're on a journey. We're here to see part of the journey, not the entire journey. So.
Right. It would just be good if the media, which I'm sure they're not going to do that because it's a moneymaker thing, would just, my goodness, they just
Right. They.
I don't think anybody would want to see anybody, their kids or loved ones, go through that much scrutiny.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
Right. But I can tell you, as a quarterback, you already are going through scrutiny.
Absolutely.
Like they used to say, like Chip Kelly used to say about Dorian at UCLA, everybody loves him when the team wins. They hate him when the team loses, even if he didn't have anything to do with the loss, know. And that's the life of a quarterback,
Right. And I have to, just like, this thing popped into my head. I do remember there were so many people that had issues with the play calling at UCLA. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there was once when people had so much to say, and I think it was Dorian's dad that said, "Oh no, that's not on my son." He was like, "That's the play calling. We're not gonna put that on my son." And I do remember a lot of people were like, "Oh, coach is not gonna like that." But Chip Kelly, he rocked with Dorian no matter what. And I know we had talked about this. You asked that question in the interviewing or the recruiting process. How are you going to rock with my son when people, all that chatter, talking all of that stuff, are you going to support him? Maybe if you didn't win this game or whatever the case may be. And so, there are people out there that are speaking up, and it is necessary. But I do think that sometimes it's just like you said, Vanita, there are some people that just don't like some things. One of the things that stood out to me was when Shador was being interviewed, and the reporter asked a question about, you've turned programs around, from Jackson State to Colorado. When you get to the NFL or a team that's looking at selecting you, what can they expect from you? And Shador said, well, pretty much that's what I do. I've done it over and over and over again. And he said, if you don't want to change, what did he say? If you're not trying to change the franchise or the culture, don't get me. And he, went on to say a couple of things. So was there anything wrong with that saying that and having confidence that this is what I bring to the table? But in the interviewing process, and you saying, if you don't want that, then don't get me. I think, and Melba, you being, in that environment at UNLV, and Vanita, we've taught our kids how we present things is going to be how people receive them, whether it's right or wrong. So if you telling people don't get me, and you know who I am, you know who my dad is, this is what, that kind of thing, there are going to be people who are going to react negatively to you. So to Melva's point, it's decisions that you make sometimes that you have to think about, how is this going to affect me? Because you can't go into a corporate world and sit there and say, well, if you don't, I've done this and I grew business here. And if that's not what you want to do here, then don't hire me. It's just the presentation. And I'm
Right.
not saying that the
But
boy
I think
did
it
something
depends on
so
who it is, because there's been quarterbacks out there that have done far worse things, been in trouble, alcoholics,
Mhm.
all kind of.
Mhm.
terrible.
So
Right.
to me,
Mhm.
if it had been somebody else and they said it, it may not have been
Uh-huh.
such a problem. But because Shadora Sanders said it, that was a
Right.
big problem. So
Right.
Right. And that elevates it to
Mhm.
a whole nother level,
Mhm.
versus if Dorian had said it, for example,
Right. Right.
But I mean, I think the other side of that too is, so if you say that, if you say, well, this is who I am,
Right.
take it or leave it, some teams left it,
They
they
don't
weren't
leave it.
feeling it. Some teams were like, okay, we might take it, but we ain't dropping first round money on it,
Hmm.
guaranteed money on it. We gonna wait a little bit. So
And what's the waiting? What's the waiting about in your
drive the
opinion?
price down, right?
Is that the humbling? is that
No,
is
only God
that
can humble you. People don't have the right to try and humble individuals. That's God's business and job to
no,
do.
people will
I
humble you.
think it's
Certain
to
circumstances will humble
I think it's to drive down his price, because I think the further you down, the cheaper you get, right? Isn't
you.
that
Of
the whole
course.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of
And
course.
I think some of it too is, I mean, it's a chess match.
Mm-hmm.
Looking to see, like, teams are like, it's just not about one player or one position.
Right.
Teams go into the draft process with certain needs. They have
Mm.
people, on their boards. So like, and like, I don't know if you guys, ever went in a college coach's office
Mm-hmm.
on their recruiting board, and they've ranked every, like every quarterback that they're interested in or has shown interest in them. So
Mm-hmm.
all of that is up there on the board.
Yeah.
It's the same thing here. They have their list of, like, okay, here's the quarterbacks. Okay, let's see what we can get. It's been interesting for me listening to people talk about the Eagles GM,
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, he's always if he's if he's trading picks, he's getting something back for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's trading players, he's getting something back for him, to the point where, like, I think between this year and next year, like, the Eagles have like 20 picks
wow.
across 2 years. That's crazy.
Yeah.
There's only 7 rounds. Technically, you should have one per round.
Right.
So
Does that mean
you have
like 20 picks for the whole draft, like in the high spots? Is that what you mean?
20 picks across the whole draft for 2 years. So he's got,
He's
on
got
average, about 10 picks
per year.
per year
Wow.
for the
Wow.
next 2 years. That's insane. So you have to, like, it's more than just about, oh, I'm going to go out here and get a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I may need a quarterback, offensive lineman, a running back, a D tackle, and, a linebacker. So when it's going through, the rounds, you start looking at, okay, what's the best available? You start thinking about, who can I get now? Who's going to be left further down on the board that I can get later?
Right.
So some of that may have come in with, you know, with Shador.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and quite frankly, they took a quarterback in the 3rd round. They took
Yeah.
some running backs. So, like, I'm sitting here going, oh snap, does that mean they're bringing back Nick Chubb? What does that mean for Nick?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a running back. So you're like thinking, like, these are like the things that are going on behind the scenes that people don't always realize. Like, okay, they just took, such and such. Like, I'll give you an example. When Dorian got drafted, he got drafted at pick 140. The Minnesota Vikings traded up to pick 141 to do what? Draft Dorian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So these are the things that are going on behind the scenes that nobody sees and nobody talks about.
Right.
And so they're, like, and so now what happens? I think Minnesota ended up drafting a quarterback, but now it's later in the draft because they're like, well, we don't know for sure if we're going to keep him. And we know what the next year's class is going to look like. So what did they do? They went out the next year and they drafted J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happened? JJ got hurt. You know what I mean? So there's like all these other little pieces, that teams are managing that nobody knows or thinks about or understands.
Right. The beautiful thing that I think about is that Deion Sanders, he's made it clear that he's a man of faith, right? And Shador has said that. It's like, God's timing, perfect timing. And they even said that when he finally did get drafted, he was happy. He just looked like a kid.
Everybody else was mad.
Like,
he was
they were just like, he was so happy, and Shiloh was so happy for him. His whole family was happy. And it's like, okay, here's this opportunity. When you say, and they've said before, it's not about where you go, it's about what you do when you get there. So if we're walking in that light, here we are. The opportunity is there. I think this is like the golden ticket to show everybody everything that you have said. First of all, I'm that dude. I'm him. Mm-hmm. Second of all, I've turned programs around before and I can do it again, right? Even though Vanita was saying, but the Browns, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's been saying that. And then this is a perfect opportunity for you to come in. You're going to fight. You're going to get up to that, back up, take the position. Because is Deshaun Watson even playing?
I think he'll end up on the physically unable to perform list, on the PUP list. So
all right. So then you just have to take out a couple of dudes